Welcome back, wealth builders, entrepreneurs. Michael Rosmer here with Richucation. We're talking today about the subject of training. Okay, so we've obviously discussed evaluation, and evaluation is going to feed very heavily into this. Okay, and we're going to have some. There's going to be some interesting insights in this training process. Okay. So the first thing that I want you to start by recognizing is that we've got kind of like two forms of training, okay? And the one is what I would call company training, which is like people or department training, right? So we'll call it department training, but it could be company as well. Department training. And then we've got individual training, okay? Now, these two have separate objectives, okay? The objective here is to improve process, okay? Improve process. Then, individual training is to improve performance, okay? Both matter. Improve performance. Because the process they're using will affect what kind of results we get, and so will their use of it. Okay, so both matter. All right, we want to pay attention to both. And so we definitely want to do some evaluation. We've talked before about the evaluation of, obviously, like looking at the individual, but we also want to look at the company and figure out, okay, what's the most valuable department or company-wide training that we might do, right? What are our gaps? And this is going to bring in our next distinction, which is we're going to have what we call inside versus outside training, okay? So we've got inside training versus outside training, okay? Very important. What's the difference? This is where we bring someone from the outside into the company to train us. This is where we have someone on the inside of the company train us. Okay? And we're going to go through in each example. Generally, when we're talking about department or company training, we're usually talking about outside training. Okay? We're usually talking about bringing somebody in who can work with us. You might say, okay, should we send them out to some sort of a seminar, etc.? Usually for this, no. Because usually we want personalized training that's specifically applied to our processes. So a good trainer, somebody who's going to come in, should evaluate our processes, our scripts, all this kind of stuff, and look for, based on their expertise, areas of optimization. Okay? So that's the first piece. Outside training applied to department. Be aware of that distinction. All right? Inside training we could use for individuals, but we could also use outside training for individuals. Okay? So again, keeping in mind here that the idea is improving the process. So if we're talking about improving the process, it usually assumes that we can't self-improve it. Right? We're looking for, or not that we can't self-improve it, but that we're looking for outside ideas. Somebody else who has expertise to come in and help us. Okay? Inside training, great. And oh, by the way, to get the maximum value of this, we really want it to be implemented into systems. Okay? Corporate trainers cost a lot of money, very often. And if they just come in and pump everybody up and you get this little bump and then it dies, that wasn't very great ROI. If we can lock in what they're talking about procedurally, install it in our culture and in our systems, etc., then we can have a longevity to that, and therefore we can afford to pay more, right? 1% boost in sales might not seem like a lot, but if it lasts for 10 years, then that's worth a lot, right? The 10%, even better, and so on, okay? And we should provide feedback to them based on how they do and hold them accountable for the results and so on and so forth. Okay? Ideally, we want some continuity in here, by the way. Usually, having them come in once is not that great. We want continuity for the best results. And we want them to get their hands dirty. So I see, the idea here is not like consultants. Okay? The idea is someone who's going to roll up their sleeves and work with us on this process. Maybe they're only coming in once in a while, but as an example, they're going out on sales calls, they're listening on phone calls, they're role playing with us, they're etc. Right, to help work on improving the process. Okay? Sometimes it's consultant, but very rarely. Okay? That's generally we want somebody who's a little more hands-on. We're gonna, in my experience, we get better ROI. We get more traction from that process. Okay? And we can negotiate them down because it's a little more extended contract. All right? And then we might have that person then work with some individuals, possibly. Okay? All right, so that's inside training versus outside training. We've talked a little bit about this. Now, our next point is that generally, individual training, the key is that most individuals do not need the same training. Okay? So, most individuals don't need the most training. The same training. And as a result, we're going to go with their personalized plan, right? So they should have a personalized plan. And that should be based on their strengths, weaknesses, threats, opportunities, right? Okay, for that training, should it be internal or external? Usually, what we like, ideally, if it's skills-based, is we'd prefer to have someone internal do the training. How come? A bunch of reasons. First of all, it generally drives down costs. It can help with interaction, and when you teach something, you learn something. So we're having our team learn it by teaching it, okay, which is great. Of course, we want to measure their improvement. Okay, so we want to measure how effective that person is. And we might rotate them through a few. Okay, so we're going to find somebody who's effective, we're going to measure how effective they are, off we go. Okay? So that's very important. In some cases, we want them to go out, and in some cases, we want them to self-train. Okay, so first of all, there might be some cases where we want self-training. Self-training is like, hey, do some research, look it up on the internet, read some books, etc. This is like a personal plan, all right, that they're going to work on. But we also might send them to seminars, etc. Send to seminars, etc. I wouldn't go crazy with that, but once a year, once every 6 months, depending on what's going on, etc., this might be useful. Make sure that it's applicable to the course. Make sure that they have buy-in on it. Ideally, they came to you with it. So ideally, you can say, hey, look, if there's some seminars or something you want to attend to help improve on this skill, let us know. And, it's possible that we'll pay for it or pay for a portion of it, okay, depending on the situation. So this is continuing education. We want to encourage that quite a lot, okay? And maybe, by the way, in certain circumstances, maybe them paying for part of their continuing education is part of the job requirement, right? You have certain careers that you need CE credits, continuing education credits. And that's something to establish when you get in, right? During the interview process, etc., you're going to figure out, are they someone who cares about continual learning? What do they do for continual learning, etc.? And so you might do co-pay for it and require that they do a certain amount of it, etc. Okay? So that's another key. So what's our next thing? What we want to do, what we want to emphasize when we're talking about training is we want to emphasize breaking it down. And this really goes to our whole process of helping them to learn, which we're going to talk about that in just a second. Okay, so we want to break it down. Okay, so we want them to be learning particular areas. By the way, here, what they want to be focused on is you want to focus on greatest opportunities, and reinforcing the areas that we can get the maximum value out of, right? Which again tends to be focusing more on their strengths and less on their weaknesses. Although correcting weaknesses, eliminating weak links in the chain is really, really critical from a deliberate practice standpoint. So we want to be aware of that, the very errors-focused approach. Okay, break it down. So this is where we're going to specify a very particular thing they're going to work on, okay? So they're not going to work on sales at this stage. They're going to work on closing skills. They're going to work on, handling objections. They're going to work on, whatever, right? And they're going to go through that process. As we mentioned already before, when we're talking about evaluation, they came up with a plan, and so that plan includes schedule, right? So we've set some time aside for it. Very, very important that it is scheduled. And generally, my approach is to pay a certain amount for them to do that. So I will pay them for a certain number of hours per week that they're able to train. Okay? And that's, usually something like 5%, but, if we have a 20% time rule, maybe up to 10%, so 10% is spent on some other task and 10% is spent on training, something like that, right? But you want to make sure that it's scheduled and measured, of course. Alrighty. By the way, we might encourage them to get an outside mentor, right? Let's write that down. Outside mentor, or do a mastermind. Okay? So collaborate with other people in the industry, etc. Maybe you're in the field of design or marketing or something. Get them to join. Not one of the usually hyper expensive ones, right? But find some other people they can collaborate with. Might be useful. Okay? Which, by the way, that can also be a potential recruiting tool for us to reach out to potential people who might come on board with us later. So also very valuable. Okay. Next thing. We want to teach them how to learn. Okay? So most people don't know how to learn. And as a result, they're going to be fairly ineffective at this. So we want, part of our process, we want to teach them how to learn. Okay? Teach how to learn. And this is going to be primarily two things. It's going to be modeling. Okay? So we want them to find somebody who they can model, and deliberate practice. And we want them to design some deliberate practice that they can do for this, for what they're going through here, okay? Very, very important. Very errors focused, quick feedback, right? We're in that process. You may want to get them to read some books, require that they read the book and, submit some sort of report or have some sort of conversation, however it works, okay? So that's very nice, very useful, very helpful. What else have we got in here? All right, so the next thing is to figure out what type of training we're going to be looking at. So there's basically, I would say, there's a few areas that we might look at for them, okay? Of course, there's job and technology training, right? So job training, this is what we would consider skills, okay? Job training. There's also technology training. Technology training can do a lot to enhance. And by the way, sometimes the company that is selling the technology will sometimes provide training for free, which is awesome, right? Very good. So job training, technology training. Then we have interpersonal, which might factor into the job. Although if you think about, as an example, management, right? Job training, it's kind of some overlap there. Leadership, etc. Then what we've got is we've got team or culture training, okay? And by this I do not mean cultural sensitivity. What I mean is our culture, right? Like we want to embed a certain corporate culture, and so having team training. This is usually most effective done from somebody outside. Somebody outside comes in and facilitates team building days for us, team training, etc. And so maybe we're going to do a team building day once a year, or once every 6 months, once every 3 months, usually never more often than once every 3 months, usually less, right? Usually it's like, okay, we'll maybe do it every 6 months, that kind of thing, okay? And, you're going to work together, you're going to get to know the other people, you're going to reinforce. The last thing that's very important is personal development, okay? I would highly encourage you to train and get everybody involved in personal development in your company. But make sure that they're bought into it, okay? So great personal, there's, different stuff. There's a company called Landmark, there's Tony Robbins, there's, lots of different ones out there that have great material. And, I would usually go through it yourself first and then see what you can do. Okay, so that gives us pretty solid repertoire. We're going to, last thing. We want to have a goal, okay? So make sure you have a training goal. Training goal. That if they're working with someone, that person should be aware of that goal. And rhythm. Okay? So it's like, all right, my goal is to increase my closing ratio by 5%. Okay, great, that's a goal, right? We're measuring it, we're working on it. What is our breakdown? And we can just keep applying rhythm. Okay, we've taught them how to learn. They're working with somebody on training, etc. And this is going to help them to see progress. Okay, so I want to get. It's just like you think about at the gym. You know, I want to increase how much I can lift. I want to lose weight. I want to increase, my muscle mass. I want to, things like this. Okay, very, 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 very important to have a goal and to apply that rhythm. And so last thing here. I mentioned this in one of the other videos, but I heard some reservations around, and usually my hesitation around training is like it costs a bunch of money, right? And some people will say, well, hey, if you go and you train these people, what if you spend all this money training them and then they leave? Okay? And Brad Sugar's response is, well, think about what happens if you don't train them. Then they might stay. In reality, my experience is training builds loyalty. So it's actually more likely that they'll stay if you're investing in them than if you're not. And so that's helpful in itself. But on top of that, training is like a great win-win. We want to, this training should be ROI driven. Okay? So the idea is not to just haphazardly train, which is what most people do. Okay? That's a mistake. What you want to do is you want to say, hey, okay, based on what your performance is in the company, I can evaluate, look, if this was the case, that would help us in this way. There's a ROI to that. So I can now attach a budget to it. Okay? I can have a training budget based on our objectives that we're going to improve through the training process. How cool is that, right? I can drive down customer acquisition costs, right? I can increase lifetime value, or we can, on and on and on, right? Very, very useful. So I hope that helps. If you want some support and assistance on this, reach out to us, join the action classes. I'm going to see you guys on the next video.